Well, hello and welcome, and thank you so much for joining us. I know everyone's busy, got a lot on our plates, so the fact that you have chosen to invest your time here today with us, we're very grateful, and it's my promise that I'm going to do my absolute best to give you some tools, tactics, strategies to help you in the way you think with mindset. And I'm going to help you understand why that's so critically important. But then, more tactically, help you around cash flow, give you some tools, skills, and ways to think about that and manage that in your business for now in this time of crisis. But more importantly, when we get up and running, because there's still going to be a few hurdles to jump. Before we dive into the nitty gritty, I want to share with you just a couple of principles around learning. We're going to be here for 90 minutes, so let's make sure that 90 minutes is a good use of your time. Number one, if you are in the camp of people that believes you are a good multitasker, I'd like to challenge that belief, and we're going to do that with a quick exercise. So what we're going to do is, with a pen and paper and a stopwatch, if you've got a smartphone, grab your stopwatch. You're going to write out the numbers 1 to 26 in a row, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on, up to 26. And then you're going to write the letters A through Z, all 26 of them, A, B, C, D, all the way through to Z. Do the 1 to 26 and the A to Z, do all that and time yourself and see how long it takes. All right, ready, set, go. Okay, hopefully we're done there. At the risk you're not, I'm going to start speaking anyway. Okay, so if you've got your time down for that first exercise, now we're going to do it again, but we're going to mix it up. Instead of writing all the numbers and then all the letters, this time when you time yourself, writing one number, then one letter. One number, then one letter. So it's going to look like 1A, 2B, 3C, 4D, etc. all the way through to 26Z. Z. And we're going to see how long that one takes you. All right, as fast as you can. Ready, set, go. Okay, I'm hoping everyone has got there. If you haven't got there by now, then it just certainly proves our point. So hopefully, and maybe someone got this, the other way around, and you're going to prove me wrong. But I'm going to assume that in that exercise, it took you longer the second time than it did the first time. And the way this works is that we're getting our brains, we're switching them from one thing to the other really fast, kind of like multitasking. And so you can see that the time it takes to do the multitasking version is longer than to do the focus thing. So the message here is, if you want to get the most from this session, be here. Don't try doing your email or other things at the same time. Of course, that's totally up to you. Number two is, I'm going to tell you a story about Brenda and Heather. So Brenda and Heather are two clients. They run, one client, mother and daughter. The mother's business, obviously, daughter came into it. Daughter's Heather, mother's Brenda. And Brenda had been running his business for about 20 years. And Heather came in, and after about a year of Heather coming in, she came across us and engaged us. Well, Brenda and Heather did. But Brenda wasn't too keen. I keep reminding her, her words were, "What are these bozos going to teach us?" But anyway, the point is that as we got engaged, as we got underway, all along, we're coming to the table with strategies, helping them to see things a little more clearly. And Brenda was very resistant all the way along. Always giving reasons why something wouldn't work, or why it wasn't applicable to her business, or she'd tried this before. And that was always the story. That was always the narrative coming out of her. And Heather, on the flip side, even when there was something suggested that probably wasn't applicable, her response was, well, how could that work for us? How can we change that so that we might get the same result? And so she thought about things very differently. She had a very open mind. And it's this concept, like we might cover things today that you've heard before, that you might have initial response that something won't work for you or is not applicable. I'm going to encourage you to suppress that urge and instead ask questions like, how can I make that work for me? Or what might be the angle for my business? So when we ask questions in a certain way, we get certain responses. It's all about the quality of questions that we ask, about having an open mind. So I want to encourage you to have an open mind as we go through. And last principle, if you like, learning principle, I'm going to tell you a story about Mike, the business broker. And if you've read my book, you would have read about Mike. Mike was looking to recruit salespeople when he's having some trouble. And he'd recruited 3 when he was sort of getting frustrated. And so he gave me a call, and we sat down and had a chat. This was just to sort of discover what was going on. He hadn't engaged me at this stage. And I asked Mike what had been going on. He told me, okay, the first salesperson he hired looked good on paper. And then within 3 months, they got a better offer and they left. I said, okay, well, tell me about the second one. And he said, same sort of story. She looked good on paper. I brought her in. I sent her on a project up north and then she never came back. I thought, okay, we're starting to see a trend here. And I said, what about the third one? He said, well, the third one's been with me for 1.5 years. I said, well, that's great. And he said, well, not really, because he hasn't sold anything. I said, okay, that is also a problem. And, through this conversation, I got a bit of a feel for Mike. And so I said to Mike, listen, in these 3 hires, what's been the one consistent factor there? And he thought about it and he looked back up at me and he said, well, Jamie, they're all idiots. And I said, okay, Mike, what else? What else is consistent in these 3 hires? And I'm looking at him straight in the eyes. And he said, you trying to tell me that it's my fault? What Mike couldn't understand was that he had written the ad, he'd done the selection, he'd done the onboarding, he compensated, trained, inspired or not. It was his, he was the leader. So therefore, he absolutely had an influence on how well these people turned out. And this is the message, right? In our business, the one consistent factor is us. So we want to take what I call radical responsibility. Radical responsibility means that there's no excuses, right? You're not looking to blame others, be in denial, come up with excuses. It's that whatever's going on, it's up to me to do something about it, right? You may not always be the reason why something is the way it is, but you have a choice. You always have a choice in how you're going to respond. Look, I'm just going to pause the slides here and go to the flip chart. Just hang on a second. Now, so there's a concept presented by Jack Canfield that says in any event, E plus R equals O. You see that okay? Hope so. So where the E equals the event, the R is your response, down a little bit, and the O is the outcome. So we can't always control the events in our life or in our business, but what we can control, what we have 100% control over, is our response to those events. So the situation we're in now is a perfect example, right? There's coronavirus has hit us. There's a massive pandemic and crisis across the world. We can't control that, but what we can control is our response to that. That means we can always influence the outcome. Now, what usually gets in the way here is that every event that happens, we tell ourselves a little story. we tell ourselves a story about that event that gives it meaning to us. And then our response, or more likely our reaction, is just a set of programming that we've learned over the period of our life in response to this story. And we're going to talk more about that. But what I'm asking, or what I'm sharing with you, is that if we're willing to take 100%, what I call radical responsibility, back to sharing our screen, radical responsibility means that regardless of what goes on, regardless of who we think is responsible for something, we take 100% responsibility in how we respond to it. So just trying to throw that one up on the screen there. And I'd suggest to you that if you get nothing else from this session, take that one away, because that one is absolute gold. Oops, we jumped right ahead. Okay. Very briefly, Mark talked about my intro, what we do. I've got a small team that helps me. They're all over the globe. Melina's over in Canada. She's my right hand. Kieran is in New Zealand, helped us with our strategic communications. So what we're going to talk about in Wednesday's session, just to skip ahead, is partly about remote working. So we've got a bit of experience around that. But my team helps me out in different ways. And as Mark said, we work with a lot of businesses around the world, mainly in North America and Australia. And we also have businesses in both of those continents. So everything I'm going to share with you today is stuff that we do in our own businesses and stuff that we share with the clients that we work with. All right, another quick exercise for you. All right, trying to keep you guys engaged here. So actually this one's very relevant when we're going to start talking about the mindset component of cash flow and our businesses. So again, with a pen and paper, I want you to write down the first 3 words that come to mind when I say the word money. What are the first 3 words that come to mind when I say money? Mark, just so you know, I've muted you. If you need to say anything, feel free to unmute yourself. Okay, next one. First 3 words that come to mind when I say the word business. First 3 words come to mind when I say business. First 3 words that come to mind when I say your business. First 3 words that come to mind when I say making sales. And then lastly, first 3 words come to mind when I say the word profit. Okay. So we're going to park that one and we're going to come back to that in just a second. You'll find out why we did that. Talking about mindset, pretty famous quote here. I think it was Henry Ford. I've certainly heard it quoted by him, maybe it was somebody else. Whether you think you can or you think you can't, either way, you are right. Sometimes that gets interpreted as positive thinking. Sometimes mindset gets interpreted as positive thinking. Certainly positive thinking is a part of mindset, but we're going to be talking about a lot more. And I don't believe in positive thinking as the only strategy. It's one tool in the toolbox. So this is certainly not about walking around with a permagrin pretending that everything's okay. When in fact it may not be. And we've certainly, there's plenty of opportunity here in our current environment to not feel too positive. But with that, before I dive into it, I just want to do a quick poll to get a feeling from you guys on where you're at. Help me sort of tailor the content a little bit. So I'm going to launch a poll here up on the screen. Just 2 questions for you. The first one, to sort of understand the state of your business, how things have gone for you over this COVID-19 period. And the second one, to sort of just check in on you, like let me know how you are feeling about the whole thing. So, you know, if everyone's sort of in a couple of camps there, I'll tailor the content appropriately. And if people are spread out, then obviously I'll be more diverse in the way I approach. So can everybody see the poll? Yes, okay, good. Questions come in, responses come in. Okay, just waiting for a couple of others. All right, so most people are down, not surprising. Okay, nobody's up in terms of business. Okay. All right, I'm going to end the poll there. Thanks, everyone. That helps me a lot. Okay, so first thing, like what we're going to cover here about the mindset component is a little bit of, call it theory, or it's far from theory, but it gives you a bit of a framework or understanding. And then we're going to dive into some specific tools that you can use to adjust or get your mindset to where you want it to be. And mindset is really about thinking. So why is it so critical? It is absolutely critical. And I believe that of all the things that I'm going to be talking about today, Wednesday and Friday, mindset is by far, while it's probably the most intangible, it is by far the most important. It absolutely influences everything. And this next slide is going to help you understand that. So I call this a circle of choice. It's basically, if we look at your life, what your life encompasses right now, you can trace it right back. Starting with your actions, right? The actions that you take give you your results. You either choose to do something or you don't choose to do something. And that's your choices, right? Your choices lead to your actions or your lack of actions. Your choices, where do they come from? Well, your choices come from your questions. When I talk about at the beginning about open and closed mind, one of the great things about our brain is it has the ability to answer or find answers to whatever questions we ask it. Just that sometimes we don't always ask the greatest questions. So questions are absolutely critical. You know, we normally think about things when it gets to the stage of choices and actions. Rarely do we sit back and think, well, how do we ask a better question? So our questions come from our thoughts, you know, the quality of our thoughts. Now, thoughts come from our education. Whatever programming we've received to date becomes the basis from which we can think. Think of it like you've got a database of thoughts sitting in your mind that have been programmed in over the time, and it's been your education. And your education comes from your environment. You know, whatever you grew up in, your household, your friends, your peers, whatever school you went to, you learned from all the people around you that you've interacted with, both formally and informally. And so when we look at that, we can see different inflection points or points that we can intersect all the way around that circle, from your environment through to your education, your thoughts, your questions, your choices, your actions in your life. So all of this plays, it's like a flow-on effect. That also plays out in this one, the formula for success. So the three components here are be times do equals have, where have is your results or the goals, the things you want to have. They are a function of the things you do and a function of the way you think. So same sort of principle, it's the person times what they do that equals the results. So let's just unpack that a little bit to understand what that B component is. I'm going to stop the screen again for a second. You know, this is kind of like that mantra, you know, if I want more, then I've got to work harder. Well, maybe that would be more action, doing more. The other thing is if I want more, I have to become more. I have to improve me. I have to get better. Like I have to become better. So back to the flip chart. There's a couple of areas you can do that. We draw this one in like an iceberg. Okay, can we see that okay? So like an iceberg we can see 10% of the top of the iceberg, and that's about the same with people. What we can see from people, we can see their decisions, we can see their actions, and generally we see their behaviour. Sorry, I should be speaking to the microphone. I hope you can hear me okay. We can see their behaviour. All that comes from the stuff that's actually below the surface. So the first one there is your skills. The next one is your values, right? People's values drive their behaviour. Their skills drive their behaviour. If you can do things, then you go and do them, or you do them to a certain degree of wellness. Then we've got below that, we've got beliefs. So this brings me back to that exercise where you wrote down the 3 words, 3 words that you thought of when I mentioned those other, money, business, your business, and so on. What I was getting you to do there was to identify some of your beliefs. Like whatever came out is how you think about those things, which is a way to think about beliefs. Beliefs are things that we hold to be true. And beliefs either help us or hinder us relative to what we want to get out of life. So there's no right or wrong, but things do help or hinder. So you're looking for helpful beliefs. So if you go back to look at what you wrote down against those 5 words that I got you to reflect on, look at what you wrote down and say, gee, are those beliefs, are they helping me to get more of those things or less? And the second last one, which is really, really important, is identity. Now, identity is your definition for you. And the great thing about that definition is that you get to decide what it is. No one else gets to decide. But there's a good chance that so far, most of your identity has come from what other people have told you or what you've picked up, feedback you've gotten along the way. You've been told that you're good at things, you've been praised for certain things, and we get programmed along the way to believe certain things about ourselves. So when we give ourselves permission to sort of sit back and go, well, you know what? I want to redefine that. I want to be someone different. We absolutely can be. Now, don't get that mixed up between where your talents, your genius might lie. I'm about 5'4", 5'5.5" or something. To think that I'm going to be a pro basketballer is probably not a realistic thing. That wouldn't be a great identity for me to say that's where I'm going to be. But if you want to say that, you know what, I'm going to become an outstanding business person, or I'm going to be an absolute master at cash flow, if that wasn't you now, you can absolutely do those things. If I want to, significantly grow my business and want to be a truly successful business person, you can choose to be that. And the kicker is that you have to choose that. You have to consciously choose that and embody that person before you get to have those things. That's what brings us back to the be times do equals have. To have something, you've got to be something first, which is a bit of a head game, because if you haven't got it, sometimes it's hard to think that way. But I'm going to share some other things with you that are going to help with that. The last one is your environment. So to give you a bit of an abstract example here, let's say currently you were a smoker and you want to give up smoking. So you want to have the identity of a non-smoker. Well, it's much easier to hang around non-smokers to become a non-smoker. Likewise, if you want to build a massively successful business, hang around people who have grown massively successful businesses, right? You're going to learn more, and you're going to start to change the way you think by osmosis, by just taking in what those other people are putting out. You're going to be affected by their thinking. Okay, let's go back to the PowerPoint. So that's what I mean by be times do equals have. So expanding on that, so growing your be. How do we grow our be? So skill set, I talked about that in the iceberg there, growing our skills, growing our mindset. So that's our identity, challenging our beliefs, clarity on our values, right? So those 2 things really equal our potential, like what we can do. But then it's our potential times our state. So what that means is you could be the most capable person in the world, but if right now your closest personal intimate relationship was in tatters, or you just had a fight in the morning and you've walked out the door and gone to the office, your actual effectiveness is going to be dramatically reduced. Now, that's a pretty dramatic example, but it might be that you didn't sleep well. It might be you haven't been eating well. It might be you just got some really bad news about something. There can be all sorts of things that affect our state, but it's really the effectiveness that is the measure at the end of the day. So there's three components there that we know we can affect. We can affect our skill set, which we're going to be doing here today. We can affect our mindset, which we are going to give you tools for doing that, and we can affect our state. So let's talk about state a little more. I think this one is highly underrated. So what affects your state? Well, I mentioned one of them already. That's relationships. I've mentioned a few actually. Relationships, health, focus, right? Focus is what you're thinking about. Your physiology, right? How you are, your body, how you're holding your body and what goes into that. And lastly, your language. Language can also think about your internal language or the story that you tell yourself. So I don't want to spend too much time on these, but if you're feeling like you're not in the state that you want to be, it's one of these five that's going to have the lowest hanging fruit for you. So let's look at some actionable steps you can take out of this. The actionable tool, number one is around the relationships. That one has a level of draw on your energy and your mental state that is greatly underestimated if it's not going well. And the flip side is, and when I say relationships, it could be any. It can be your the closer the relationship, the more impact it has on you. Yes, a relationship that's more distant is not going to have as big an impact, regardless of how strong or weak it is. But you want your closest relationships to be thriving. So that could be, significant others. It could be kids, could be parents, could be employees, could be business partners, could be suppliers, whatever, who knows? Only you will know which are your closest relationships. And when you've got a tight bond around your relationship, it actually gives you greater strength to act faster and stronger. Think about it this way. This is a little bit of an abstract example, but to talk about physics, the stronger the gravitational pull of a planet around the sun, the faster it can go because that gravity is holding it in place. So, but if that gravitational bond is weak, then as soon as it starts to speed up, that planet's going to spin off into the stratosphere. And so it is relationships. We've got a tight bond in our relationships. We can spin fast. But if we don't, then we're shaky and things aren't as grounded. So there's that component. Likewise, if relationships aren't going well, then our mental state is affected and our energy levels are affected. Health, this one's kind of a 101, but yet surprisingly, a lot of people skip it. So the key ones with health are sleep. Sleep is number one, in my opinion. When you're well rested, you've got the self-discipline to make better choices around food and exercise. So they're the three big components: sleep, food, and exercise. I'll throw in there on the mental side, meditation. If you're a meditator already, then you already understand the benefits of that. If you're not, you're going to fall into a couple of camps. You're going to be, either, gee, I've thought about that, but don't know where to start, or you're going to be, gee, that's only for weirdos. I can assure you it's not only for weirdos. It is now a very well documented, scientifically researched practice around. Think of it this way. Your mind and its thoughts are like a muscle. And if you don't have control of that muscle, or you don't have the ability to understand how that muscle works, then you're at the mercy of that muscle. And that's what meditation helps you to do. It helps you to gain an awareness of what's going on in your mind and not necessarily control it, but understand what to listen to and what not to. And in a time like we're going through at the moment, that is just such a valuable skill. It is genuinely a superpower to be able to have that level of internal awareness is a real tool and a real skill that can help in a variety of situations, this situation being one of them. Then the last one is your programming. And I talk about programming in what you're putting into your mind. So if you're currently scanning the coronavirus stats day in, day out, that is not going to be a good thing to be putting into your mind. if you instead, you're staying aware of what's going on and how you need to comply, or when your business might be able to open up again, that's a good level of thinking about it. But then I'd be filling the rest of your mind with proactive things that can give you better ways to think. Now, when I talk about proactive things, I'm talking about your reading, watching, listening, all the things that you consume that help you to think in new and better ways. So, and who you hang out with? Well, right now you're not hanging out with many people. You're hanging out with family. But same concept around the identity I talked about. Who you hang around and what you listen to. So it's basically your programming, because every little bit of information that goes in gets into your subconscious. Like every little bit stays in there. So you want to be, if you want to expand your mindset, you want to be very vigilant about what you allow into that mind of yours. It's just a valuable piece of your personal body, mind, whatever it is. You got to treasure it and really guard it. I know that sounds all weird, but it's the truth. All right. Very quickly I want to move on to the money side of things, but I want to talk about this concept of flow. Because I think understanding flow is, well, it's, as I've got on the screen there, flow is a state of effortless timelessness. Meaning, think about a time when you have been involved in doing something and just time just seems to vanish because you're so engrossed in what you're doing. And to be able to be in that state and create the results that you want in your life is just, it's a desirable place to be, and something that is worth working towards. I don't know if we can be there all the time, but it's certainly a good place to be. And this is, this subject is well beyond the scope of this webinar, but I just want to share this concept with you because I've got a very simple model that can help you think about it and increase your chances of getting in that state. Getting into flow. Flow is achieved when you, at the intersection of being in the ideal state, which we've just spent a fair bit of time talking about, where you are practicing your strengths. So there are certain things that you are just naturally come easy to you. We call this your unique genius. There are things in your life that you just find easy that other people really, might not necessarily struggle at. Some would, but certainly don't find as easy as you do. And then your values. So getting really clear on what your values are. And that might sound like a simple thing to do, but it can sometimes be surprising. And if you'd like a tool to help you think through that, there's a great one by Dr. John Demartini. You can either go to his website, and I can send you the link to that. If you want access to any of the things I've spoken about so far, please just email me, and I'll throw that email up at the end of the webinar. You can either go to his website to do that exercise, or I've also got a version of it that will save you getting his email spam as he goes. But when you're operating within your values, playing to your strengths, and you're in the right state, that's where you've got the greatest chance of achieving that flow state. So with that one, I hope all that has been either a great refresher for you, or you've got a couple of nuggets there. And we're about to move on to the money side of things. And, I want to say that I've already said it already, but I can't stress enough how powerful all of these principles and strategies are, not just for your business, but for all aspects of your life. If you want your life to really go somewhere and to be in flow, then the more effort and proactivity you put around the mindset side of things, the better things will go. The big caveat there is that I'm not talking about, becoming a seminar junkie or just reading lots of things and then hoping things are going to work. Now, back to the formula for success on B times do equals have. There is a do in there. We absolutely have to take action. But becoming better, investing the time in becoming better, means the actions you take are amplified. So it's that notion of working smarter, not harder. And we can only work smarter when we become better. Again, our business is a reflection of us. Even now in these times, you may not say the P&L, the income statement, or your revenue that's coming in is a fair reflection, but how you come out of this and how you've managed it so far is still a reflection of you. You can learn things from that. Life can be a bit of a mirror there. And that's, either it should always be good news. It should always be good news because life shows us where we need to focus. Okay, let's come back to the money side of things. So before we jump into this, I'm going to just do a quick poll. I want to understand how you think about money. And so let me go to my poll. And just a quick financial literacy poll here. So I'm going to launch that one. Just want to get your feedback on how you rate yourself on financial literacy. Financial literacy is, when you look at some numbers, well, I guess the responses I've got there are probably pretty self-explanatory. Do you enjoy the numbers? Do you know what you're looking at? Do they intimidate you? How would you describe your level of financial literacy? Just waiting for a couple more. Maybe waiting for those who scored well on the multitasking test and they've gone off to do something else. Okay, great. All right, we're all in. Okay, good. All right, we've got one who knows more than they're an accountant. Awesome. Maybe you are an accountant. That's great. Thank you very much for that. So what we're going to cover off here is 4 key things. We're going to talk about cash flow drivers. We're going to talk about cash flow forecasting. We're going to talk about profit drivers and then some strategies for the current environment. Now, I'll precursor this by saying that normally if I'm running this session live and I ask people to put up their hand who enjoys the numbers of the business, assuming I've got all business owners in the room, I'm lucky if I get a third of the people put their hand up, which tells me that most people don't enjoy the numbers part of the business. And I find that's usually for 1 or 2 reasons. One is people are either intimidated by the numbers, or 2, they just lack the interest. They'd rather go and do something more exciting. And they're both fair things to feel or to experience. My antidote to those, if you find you're in one of those 2 camps, is a couple of things. One is to understand there's a direct correlation between financial strength and financial results of a business and your financial literacy. Meaning, if you want to make money and have a financially healthy company, you need to understand about numbers. And number 2 is the numbers are not complicated. It's addition and subtraction math. Where we get intimidated is when we start throwing around words like debits and credits, or getting into the nitty gritty around the financial statements. So outside of the scope of this, I've got tools I can give you to access that give you a lot of very simple education around financials, because it does not need to be an intimidating thing. Now, that said, we are going to be talking about numbers, and I am going to throw a spreadsheet or 2 up. But they are very, relatively simple spreadsheets. And certainly if that isn't the case when you first look at them, trust me, with a little bit of time invested, you'll master it. I haven't found a business owner yet that can't master this stuff. So there's no need to be intimidated. All right, let's jump into looking at some cash flow stuff. So the first one is understanding cash flow versus profit. And this is a really important distinguishing factor, because a lot of people get tripped up by this. We often look at our profit and loss statement or our income statement, and it shows we made profit or we didn't make profit. But then we look at our bank account and we try and understand where that is. Like I say, our income statement says we made profit, but it's not in our bank account. It doesn't make sense. Why isn't it there? We made this profit. So the first thing to understand is that profit is not cash flow. Profit is not cash. Unless you are running cash accounting. I don't want to get too in detail on that. We're going to be largely talking about accrual accounting, which is meaning, you will enter the transaction into your software at the time, often before you actually get paid or pay for something. So there's a cash gap there. So profit is a theory. It's a good theory, but it is just a theory. Cash is reality. So we want to understand our cash gap. I'm just going to, bear with me, I'm going to dive into this a little bit more. So why doesn't profit equal cash? Well, profit is a bunch of promises. As I said, if someone buys something and you draw up an invoice, that invoice represents a promise that they're going to pay you some money, but they haven't actually paid you yet. You may have delivered the good or the service, but you haven't been paid. And same with the bill. You buy something, someone sends you a bill, you may have received the good or service, but you haven't necessarily paid for it yet. So there's a promise that you're gonna pay that bill. So it's a question of timing, and what I'm talking about in this instance is largely about what we call operating cash flow, just the daily running of your business. There's often a lag between when the entry happens in your accounting and when you actually pay or get paid for that thing. So let's take a look at the cash gap or potential cash gap. Here's what it looks like. Let's say, and this is an example for a business that holds inventory. So if you're selling physical goods, and I'll show you how this might apply to a service business in a second. But let's say the stock arrives on day 0, you buy something and you've got 30 days to pay for it. So on day 30, the money goes out of your account. Now the stock sits on your shelves for about 60 days and then you sell it at that point. So goods get dispatched on day 60. And then, in this example, hopefully it's an extreme example, but it illustrates the point. You may take up to 60 days to collect your receivables, meaning it takes another 60 days for you to get paid. So on day 120, you get the cash in. So cash went out on day 30, day 120, cash came in. So you got a cash gap of 90 days. In terms of growing a business, that's really problematic because the faster you grow that business, the more it's going to be a problem. And I'm going to show you what that means in just a little while. So there's 3. I talked just a second ago about operating cash flow. And operating cash flow refers to the buying and selling. So it's the collections from customers, payables to your suppliers, and holding any kind of inventory. But there's other parts of cash flow that can differentiate between profit, what you see on your profit and loss statement, and what shows up in your bank account. The second type of cash flow that can affect things is called investing cash flow, and that's buying and selling assets. So that might be equipment, right? It might be cars, it might be machinery, it might be computers, it might be real estate. You might pay some cash for those things, but they don't show up as an expense on your profit and loss. We have to amortize those over a period of time, and that's usually called depreciation. But it does not equal the rate that you depreciate something. Rarely equals the speed or the timing of which you actually paid the cash for it. And the last one is called financing cash flow. And financing cash flow is where you borrow or pay back money, or you as the owner pull money out of the business, or you as the owner put money into the business. Those transactions don't show up on your profit and loss statement. So there's a number of things there that can happen from a cash point of view that affect cash flow, like your bank account, but don't show up on your P&L. The one I want to focus on is the operating cash flow. And let me give you an example here. There's 3 things. If you have inventory, then there's 3 things you need to be very aware of. If you don't have inventory, there are 2. And it's the collections from customers or accounts receivable, and the payment of your suppliers. And if you do have inventory, it's how long you hold that inventory. So what I want to show you here is if we do some little tweaks, what impact that can have on our operating cash flow. So in this example, you've got a business that's doing $1 million in sales. Cost of sales, that's all their inventory they sell, represent about $250,000 of costs. Their expenses represented $650,000, which gave them $100,000 in profit at the end of the day. So if you're looking at their profit and loss statement, that's what you'd see. Now we go and look at what if we tweaked some of their operating cash flow drivers that I spoke about. So the first one is accounts receivable, like how fast you collect things. The second one is accounts payable. The third one is inventory. So with accounts receivable, let's say on average they have about $125,000 in receivables. That would mean that it takes them on average 45 days to collect those receivables. And I'm not going to go into how that gets calculated. If you want to understand that, I can give you those tools after the webinar. But what if they could change that to be 35 days? Then we would see that their new average receivables would be $96,000, which means that they've just gained $20,000 in cash. Essentially, that $27,000 is now in their bank account instead of their customers. And we go over the same thing with payables. Let's say on average, on their balance sheet, they see they've got $60,000 in payables at any one time, which means that on average, it takes them 24 days to pay their bills. What if they did it to 35 days? Now, there's a lot to consider here. I'm not suggesting that you should all of a sudden just stop paying people. You might be able to negotiate different payment terms with suppliers. You've got to make sure you manage those relationships well. But if that was the case, this is just an example, their new payables would go to $86,000. So the difference there is $26,500, meaning now that cash is now in your bank account, not in your supplier's bank account. And inventory, let's say at any one time, we have an average of $60,000, which would mean that stock sits on the shelf for about 88 days. And if you change that, if you could tweak it to 65 days, now all of a sudden we're holding about $44,500 worth of inventory, which represents $15,500 in cash that's now sitting in your bank account, not sitting on the shelves. You add all those together, that represents $60,000. It's $70,000. So got a mistake there. Anyway, it's over $70,000, $76,000 of, have I got that right? Yeah, $76,000 of cash difference. So that's not by making any more sales whatsoever in this business. That's simply just tweaking those cash flow drivers. I share that with you to understand that these are important things to look at before you start going out trying to make more money. Maximizing your operating cash flow is number one. And how you do that is, well, as I said, by measuring these things and then looking at the different things you can do. And probably, this might be a little self-promoting, but if you grab my book, Jumping Off the Hamster Wheel, all the strategies are in there with the calculations and how to do that as well. And then once you've got that, you get access to all the tools that are mentioned in that. But then we take it one step further and we say, okay, we can make those tweaks, but what about day to day? If anyone spends a lot of time juggling money between bank accounts and is finding themselves a little stressed about money, then, understanding your day-to-day cash flow is a pretty important thing. So this is what we call a sleep at night tool, or otherwise called a cash flow forecast. Now I'm going to stop the share here and I'm going to switch screens and show you a couple of different cash flow forecasts. All right, number one. So this is where we're looking at the spreadsheets. All right, so what we're looking at here is different weeks. So you've got week 1 through to however many weeks you want. Up the top, we've got money coming in, so cash coming in. That comes from the 3 areas. Operations is collections from customers or sales. Sale of assets, so if you sell something, you get money. And if you borrow money, you get money. I'm only going to look at the sales here in this example, but if you need to put numbers in these other 2 areas, then you can do that. And then down below, this is just a very simple example, but I've got where money goes out. So different suppliers you've got to pay money to. And you can see these figures in here represent the timing on that, when that money has to go out of the account. So each one of these transactions will show up on your bank statement. Now that's the idea, is this tool reflects your bank account. And then down the bottom, we've got each week, is there a surplus or a deficit each week? And then what's the cash balance? So at the beginning of the week, if we're looking at this first week, we started with $5,000 in the account. We had some money come in, $6,000 came in, some money went out, $5,000 went out, means we've got $1,000 left over. So our ending cash for that week is $6,000. And that's the way it goes. And that $6,000 carries through to the beginning of the next week and so on and so forth. And you start to see here, if this business had done this and they've run a projection out 13 weeks, which is about a quarter, about 90 days, which is a good time period to start with. But they can see that, at the end of June here, they're going to run into a bit of a problem. They're going to run out of money here. So, and here's the beauty of this. Like, if you lay this out, if this was your business, you can see, you put it all the numbers in there, and you've made certain assumptions as you've done that. Some of the expenses you might be able to put in there a little more certainly. But you know that, okay, if things go like that, this is what's going to happen. So you can be proactive right now. So the first thing that we might be able to do is we look at, okay, how can we move some of these expenses? We might say, okay, payroll, you probably can't move. Supplier, okay, we might be able to move the supplier back. Let's say we negotiate to pay them $1,000 instead here. And then we say, okay, I can pay you another $1,000 down here. So now we split that up. And what's this one here? That's the Visa bill. Okay, what if we just paid a bit of that off? What if we paid $3,000? No, let's pay $2,000 of that off there. And the other $1,500 we pay off the week after. By making those two tweaks, I can see now, okay, we're good. We got cash flow. And that's how the tool works. You just move things around until you can see that you're under control. And it's sometimes going to be hard to predict these things, but having it laid out gives you a plan that, if things go like that, I'm going to be okay. But as soon as things don't start going the right way, then you're going to have to take action because you know how tight you're running. Right, this business here, this is tight. Like, you've only got a 400. I look down the bottom here at the ending cash, and I look for the lowest number, and it's $400. So I know that around this week of 22nd, it's going to be tight. If this money doesn't come in before this money goes out, we're going to have to juggle things. But I know that 7 weeks ahead of time. I'm not lying in bed stressing about it because I know it's going to happen, and I might be able to do something else to be able to predict that. So having one of these in place is just an absolute godsend. I find that the two biggest stresses in business are people and money. And when it comes to money, it's usually around the cash flow side. And this is obviously a great alleviator of that. The next level up, you'd run it weekly like this if you're running it pretty tight. But there's a bit of work in maintaining all of this. Not a lot. Like when you first start, yeah, there might be because you're learning it. But as you do it, and I recommend you do it on a weekly basis, you might need to sit down once you get the rhythm of it for an hour each week to update your cash flow forecast. And that will give you an unbelievable level of peace of mind, even if it looks bad, right? At least you can see how bad it is and you can be proactive in taking action. And another example here to show you is, if you want to run with it, if you've got a little more buffer and you want to run it on a monthly basis, it might look like this. It's exactly the same principle. So, some bigger numbers in this example, but you've got your collections coming in, and I'm going to show you a little bit more on that one in a second. And then you've got your outgoings. But in this example, I want to show you, okay, right here, they go into a big deficit because they've got this piece of equipment they want to buy. All right, so let's say you threw that 150,000 and you can see immediately, okay, that's not going to work. But you look at your cash flow and you look down here and you go, okay, we start to get a fair bit of cash down here. So you might be able to renegotiate the terms with the supplier and say, can we put a down payment here and pay small amounts, for the first 6 months with some lump sums down the end? Or you might say, we're just going to have to finance this. It's going to put too much of a strain on our cash flow. So let's finance it. Or you might say, we really don't need it there. Let's just put it off. Let's put it down here, and then we can pay cash for it. So there's any number of ways you could slice that up, but it gives you ways to look at it. Just briefly on the collection side here, you don't need to do this, but this one is set up structure for how you might collect your money. So the first line here represents the actual sales that you make. And the second line here represents how you collect money based on the terms you've got with customers. And you might know historically, we collect half our money, 50% in 30 days. we collect another 30% in 60 days, and the remaining 20 come in 90 days. And this spreadsheet just auto calculates when it should fall in which month. So if that's a suitable sort of thing for your business, just creates less work and less sort of manual adjustment. But this is a great tool, and you guys can have access to this. Happy to share that with you. Just send me an email afterwards and we can make that happen. Okay, that's cash flow forecasting. Now let's go back to our slide. Bear with me. Okay. So looking at cash flow, and I'm going to dive into briefly about profitability and actually growing things. So quick strategies. Number one, speed up collections. We've talked about that already. Incentivize people if you need to, offer discounts. Clearance sale of old inventory if you hold inventory. Look at what's on the shelves. We did this with Heather and Brenda, my examples from the start. When we first started, they looked at their inventory and their turn. They had a lot of old plastic sitting around. We were able to clear that out and get an immediate cash gain. And then they started to put some rules in place for how they were managing their inventory. Selling obsolete or unused equipment. If you've got anything lying around that might be worth something, get rid of it. Changing debt to interest only, or renegotiating your finance if you've got any debt. On Wednesday, we're going to talk a little more on how to negotiate this stuff and how to manage financiers. Number 5, if you've got unencumbered assets, you can leverage those, put some debt against them. Again, that's not a great strategy for building the health of your business, but we're talking about getting cash into the business. So sometimes what brings cash in can be conflicting to building long-term health, but you got to do what you got to do when the times are required for it. Negotiate longer terms with suppliers. We saw what happens on our payable days when we do that. Flash sales, so promoting things and clearing out with flash sales. And then back on the inventory, also ordering less and ordering more often, so not holding as much stock. So some different strategies there to boost cash. If we were looking to, how I've got on right now as I talk about this is that we've been through a period where, a lot of us haven't been able to trade, and we're about to come into a period where we are going to be able to trade. And that's going to be a tricky period because, depending on your business, you're going to have to manage your cash flow very well to make sure you've got cash to be able to operate. JobKeeper is in place right now, but how long is that going to be around for? I think till September they're talking about it's going to be in place for. So all these things I'll be building into my cash flow forecast, but then I'll make sure I've got a very clear strategy on how I'm going to open back up and how I'm going to promote my business. And I want to give you a model to think about that. And this is a model we call our 6-point growth model, which again, outline in detail on in a book, Jumping Off the Hamster Wheel. But essentially, if we look at how we create profit, it's our turnover, our sales, minus our cost of goods sold, which I refer to as gross margin, the amount that's left over, the amount of money that's left over after you have delivered that service. The direct cost associated with the service is your gross profit margin. Then you've got your overhead, which is, the fixed costs, rent, insurance, phone bills, fixed wages, those kind of things. You subtract all that, and then what's left over is your profit. These are the first 2 areas we look at in terms of growing profitability. Number 1 is looking at margins, and number 2 is looking at the overhead. But then how do we grow our turnover? We want to get more customers. If we get more customers, we look at our customers as how much they spend each time they come in, and in a year, how often do they buy? That equates to our turnover. Customers come from 2 areas if you want to get more customers. It's repeat customers and it's new customers. Repeat customers come from our existing customers, And it's how many of those, or we call this our retention rate, how many customers do we retain and repeat buy from us? On the new customer side, it's our new leads. How do we get new inquiries and how do we convert them to customers? Kimberly has raised her hand. Slides. Okay. I've shared the wrong screen. Thank you, Kimberly. Okay. Let me go back. Sorry about that. Okay, share. Share. All right. Is that better? Hoping that's better. Okay. All right, so let's go back to where we were. We were back up here looking at, so what we've got here, all these dark green areas, these are all the areas that we can directly affect. And I've got the numbers here against each one because this is roughly the order that I would think about addressing them, like in terms of thinking about ways I can increase these numbers, roughly the order I do it. Every business is different. When you start up, you've probably already done these two, the margins and overhead at this stage. So you might start looking at certainly getting your existing customers back would be number one. And then promoting more to existing customers would be number two. So the spend per customer. And then probably lastly would be the leads and conversion, but certainly conversion number one. And the reason I put in those order is because generally go out and get more leads, and there are always exemptions to this. Every business is different. Don't take my word for your business straight off this, but to go and get more leads usually requires the most effort and most cost. But to go and get existing customers back, you've usually already got the relationship, you've already got the trust, so it's usually a lot easier. And then likewise with conversion rate, like converting those new leads to customers, if you've already got leads coming in, let's optimize the conversion first before we go and get more leads. But so to give you an example of what this looks like if we were to plug some numbers in. So this is the same format, albeit laid out a little differently. We've got our existing customers up the top there. We've got our new customers here. And then we've got the rest of the variables down the bottom here. I'm just going to throw some numbers in. And again, there we go. Sorry, I'm going to switch to the Excel. Bear with me. Okay, make that one a little smaller. Share my screen. Okay, think I have shared that correctly. Okay, so we've got our existing customers up here. Let's just take these numbers out. So great exercise is to do this for your own business, to have a look at where the right opportunity might be, or you just might know intuitively where it is to start. But for example, if you had a business that had a database of 1,500 past customers, and you pick the time frame of how you measure that, but let's say it was over the last year, 1,500 people have bought from you, and your retention rate was 60%, meaning 60% of those buy from you continually, means you'd have a repeat customers of 900. Then on the new customer side, if you had 1,400 inquiries coming in, you converted half of those, you'd have 700 new customers, which add those two together would give you 1,600 customers. If they spent on average $300 over the year with you, which might be one purchase, it might be many purchases, but the average is 300, would give you total sales of 480,000. If it then, your gross profit margin was 40%, which meant you get to keep 40% of every dollar you sell, 60%, the other half of that goes into actually supplying the goods and services, your gross profit would be 192,000. Then your overhead, if your overhead, all the rent and utilities and phones and insurances, all that sort of stuff, if all that was 160,000, this business would have $32,000 in profit left over at the end of the year, which would be a 6.7% profit margin. Not a great profit margin, but maybe understandable for that size business. So let's look at if we were to change things. So again, I'm just going to go through and generalize here on these numbers, but just so you can see the power of the model, and also so you can think about where's the right place in your business to be thinking about how to grow it. Let's say we can do a better job retaining people. That might be promoting to them more effectively. It might be showing them the love. It might be having more things we can offer them. But let's say we just tweak that one by 10%. So we'd go from 900 to 990. If we can improve our lead generation, which I know I said would be the last one, but again, for the purpose of illustration here, let's say we could tweak that by 10%, which might be, being better with referrals. That's one that most people are generally don't utilize very well. Strategic partnerships, working with other businesses who share the same target market but don't compete with you. There's often some, again, I'm hesitant to talk about lead generation because it's a massive topic. But let's just say for the case of the example that we can increase by 10%. And same with conversion rate. Simply measuring your conversion rate is the fastest way to increase it, because you will just become more aware of what you're doing. Then if you understand the major objections that people have in buying your product and service, and you can incorporate ways to overcome those objections in your sales process, it could be putting a guarantee in place. It could be just understanding what they are and having responses that alleviate some of those risks. The number one reason why people don't buy from someone is perceived risk. So you're going to understand what they are. But let's say we can increase by 10%. So now our new customers goes from 700 to 847. If we combine those, our customers have gone from 1,600 to 1,837. Average spend per customer, simplest strategy here is to increase your prices. Most people underestimate where the price should be. They don't understand their cost structure properly. But other ways are, the classic upsell, sell people more things of what they need. I can give you lots of examples of things to do here. And again, I can give you a bit of a cheat sheet if you'd like that. But if we can increase that by 10%, we go to 330, which you can see has increased our revenue, total sales significantly. We're now up 26.3%. The really important point I want to stress here that it has gone up by 26.3%, not because of one thing, but because of four things above it. So when we think about growing sales, don't just think about growing sales, understand which of these drivers that you want to affect. And don't think about growing sales, think about growing profit. Profit is the number one thing to think about in this model. And then further to what I've already talked about, we've already covered, is actually not just profit, but cash, right? How do I take that profit and convert it to cash? But sticking with our model, okay, let's keep going. With our margin, what if we could negotiate with suppliers a little more, understand our margins and sell more of our high margin goods? Or if we did increase our prices, that would obviously affect our margins. Let's say we just tweak that one by 5%. So our margin would go from 40 to 42%. Our gross profit has jumped quite a bit now. We're up 32% in gross profit. And what if we could just cut our overheads just a little bit? Let's go 5%. Again, for the purpose of illustration. So you can see now profit goes from 32,000 to 102,000. Again, compounded by each of the six drivers. Not one thing, lots of little things add up to give an exponential effect. Each of these topics, each of these six things, it could be a webinar unto itself, and everyone is a different business. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to start driving in a strategy. But what you can do is you can take this model and take a look at what the numbers are for yourself. And then coming out of this, think about, okay, well, which one makes the most sense? And it can be from an opportunity point of view, or it can be an ease of doing. Sometimes things don't give you the biggest bang for your buck, but they're easy to do, so you can just tick them off. If you said, look, increasing our conversion rate was immensely difficult because of X, Y, and Z, then don't do it. Find one that's easier. Although I would suggest that conversion rate is probably one of the easiest that almost everyone on this call could certainly do. So that's our we call that a 6-point growth strategy. So that helps you to chunk down what the right starting point is once you understand your numbers and can get a few strategies in place to move forward with. Okay, coming back to our PowerPoint. Kimberly, I'm sure you'll let me know if I screw this up again. Here we go. I certainly hope you will. Sorry, just a bit of clicking involved. There we go. All right. Second last slide. So I'm not going to give you strategies, but I am. Because there are some that apply to everyone, and some of them are just the biggest mistakes. Okay, number one, stop discounting. And I'm going to share with you on the flip chart here, because this is worth talking about. Discounting is the fastest path to work really hard for not much money. So I'm just trying to stop the share. Okay, let's say your business right now has a margin of 30%. It's your gross profit margin. That means that out of every sale you make, $3, or every dollar you sell, 30 cents gets retained to pay for overhead and profit. Now, if you were to discount by 10%, if your prices went down by 10%, you would need to increase your sales by 50% to make the same amount of money. Think about that, right? You discount, you think that you're making sales because you're getting more money in, but you've got to make 50% more sales to be able to make that up. And on the flip side, if you were to increase your prices by 10%, you can lose 33% of your sales and still make the same amount of money. Now, this is a concept. I'm not saying to go out now and increase your prices by 10% or when you can open up for business, but understand the principle and be really clear on what your pricing is and how it affects profitability. Because what happens is most people make assumptions on where their pricing needs to be. Most business owners are too scared to go out and raise their prices because they're fearful that people will reject them or people will start complaining. I can't tell you how many businesses I've coached and walked them through increasing their prices and had zero impact on customer response. In fact, at times, it's even people have responded that, oh, it's about time you increase your prices. Where people do respond negatively on increasing your prices, it's usually the customers that you don't want. They're usually the very price-sensitive customers who don't value what it is that you've got. Okay, back to our PowerPoint here. So that's number one, stop discounting. With all these things, there are times when that might be appropriate, but as a generalization, don't discount. Increased price, we talked about that. Add-on sales, so what else have you got that people could be buying? And we're going to talk more about that on Friday in the business models and opportunities. But right now, you might have a suite of goods or services and people just buy one and you'll focus on one because that's what you're good at. But if you started doing some simple cross promotion, you might be surprised if 10% of your customers bought something that increased the sale by 30%, then all of a sudden now you've got a 3% increase in your total revenue. Negotiate large fixed cost expenses. Tomorrow we're going to talk more about negotiating and how to do that. And there can be sometimes some fear around that. Eliminating waste. Chances are you've probably already looked at that one already. And number 6, I touched on this one, but conversion rate. If you've got leads already coming in, start measuring that. Measure your conversion rate because you might have some just gold lying there. If you can increase your conversion rate by 10%, you increase your sales by 10%. You increase your profit by 10% straight away. Folks, that's where we're going to wrap up. Let you get an early mark. And I hope I've given you plenty of good things to walk away with. I believe we've covered the 2 most important topics in growing a business. That is how you think, and the money side. I believe business is two key components. It's people and it's money. People and numbers, I should say. People and numbers. And money is obviously a big part of the numbers equation. When you can develop a level of mastery around those two key areas, and that's why we're talking about relationships tomorrow, because that's the people side, you really have a really wide skill set to be able to do a lot of things. And when you understand the money side, the cash flow and the margins and the profitability, you can make smart business decisions and build a business that serves you and not the other way around. I mentioned all these tools. Everything I've talked about is available to you. Feel free to email me, jamie@salesup.com.au, or on our website, you can also, we put out a twice a month publication, usually twice a month, called Business Nutrition. And you can find that on our website under resources. It's free. There's also a ton of other content there under the blog that has free tools and resources also. If you were interested in the book, I know it's sold at the local Beechworth bookstore. They've got some copies there, and there's lots of downloads and links to all of this stuff from the book as well. And this webinar will also be available for you to review. Mark, I'm not sure how that will happen. Is that going to be posted? I don't know if you're still there, Mark. But
yeah, I'm still here. Yeah, that'll be posted on the Indigo Shire website, Council's website. So, yeah, no, absolutely available in the next couple of days, or certainly when we transfer it over.
Yeah, great. So before we wrap up, has anybody got any questions? I know I've gone through a lot, but if you've got questions, feel free to throw them on the chat. Oh, there you go, Q&A. There's a question. Are we automatically registered this week for the other sessions, or did we need to register again? Can you speak to that, Mark?
Yeah, if you just want to go and register on each one of those sessions, there's one on Wednesday, there's one on Friday. If you register on one, you won't automatically be registered on the other two. So I definitely recommend to go on to Eventbrite and register under those individual ones. So the one on Wednesday coming up is all about managing relationships. That's again at the same time, 11 till 12:30. And the one on Friday, this Friday, is business models and opportunities, and again from 11 till 12:30. So yeah, go on and register on those. Definitely worthwhile. Fantastic.
Matto, yeah, we can email that link out for you. So if you like, I sent an email out to everyone for this one. I'll send the link out for that next one as well, if that's all right with you, Mark.
Yeah, that's fine. Either or, I can, but certainly if you want to, go ahead.
All right. If there are no other questions, people, thank you very much for investing your time. I know you're all busy and got a lot on your minds, and I hope some of this was helpful for you moving back. And, you know, we've got a great little town, so I want to see all the businesses out there thriving and creating an awesome community. So thank you, everyone.
Yeah, look, thank you, Jamie. Just wrapping up, really some useful tools there for growing your business. Cash flow forecasting spreadsheet was excellent, and certainly the 6-point profit growth model as well. And, you know, it just gives you some multi-level areas of ideas to work on to, you know, affecting profit. The pricing strategy, I think, is really key as well. Research your competitors' pricing and see where you're sitting against your competitors is important. And yeah, we'll look forward to seeing you on Wednesday. Make sure you register. Thanks again, Jamie. That's fantastic.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, everyone.